Hey there, it's Miss Nicole with part 2 of Finding Tinkerbell, a NeverGirls adventure, Beyond Neverland. This is by Kiki, Thorpe and illustrated by Jana Christie, and we're picking up where we left off last time on chapter 6. So I hope you guys are ready to finish up our fun story. Where we left off, our characters lost the boat that belonged to her father, and it was very important because her great-grandfather made that boat with his own hands. So, here we go. Chapter 6. Out at sea, Tinkerbell took a deep breath of ocean air. The sun was shining and the blue sky stretched wide above her. The strong south wind, which had been so bothersome in Pixie Hollow, was now at her back, speeding the treasure along. A wave rose in front of the boat. Tink gripped the wheel as the treasure climbed it, then dove down the leeward side. The waves out here were bigger than she'd ever thought they would be. Flying above them, she always thought they looked so small, but Tink felt sure the boat was sturdy enough to ride them. Still, to be on the safe side, she had sprinkled the sail with a little bit of fairy dust, so the treasure could fly when needed. In case of emergency, a little magic never hurt. Up and down the boat went, riding the swells. Skull Rock loomed ahead. Tink checked her onion skin map. She was right on course and making good time. Suddenly, Tink's heart leapt. A long silver blue shape slid through the wave below her. Something was under the boat. With a splash, a fish shot out of the water. It sailed over the treasure and kept on flying, its pink fins spread out like wings. The tip of its tail traced graceful arcs on the water. Tink had barely recovered from the surprise when a second fish leaped out. It spread its fins and soared after its friend. In a moment, fish were leaping all around the boat. She was caught in a school of flying fish. That's kind of cool, huh? The fish were almost as big as the boat, but Tink wasn't afraid. With a whoop, she let out the sail again, and as the wind caught it, the treasure lifted, helped by the fairy dust. In seconds, she was soaring right alongside the fish. The fish dove back into the water, but a moment later they leaped up and flew alongside her. They seemed to want to play too. There she is with the fish. The school of fish banked right and she followed them. She was following so close she could feel spray flying off their fins. Tink waved at one of them from the deck. It was hard to say for sure, but she thought the fish waved back. Tink didn't know how long she followed the fish. They'd been flying for some time, when all of a sudden, as if led by some hidden cue, the fish dove back into the water and disappeared. Where did they go? Tink steered the boat downward and landed with a splash. She looked for Skull Rock to get her bearings. She couldn't see the skull-shaped cave anywhere. Had she passed it without even noticing? The wind had grown stronger. The treasure rose and plunged on the choppy waves. That means they were getting rough waves. Tink knew she needed to get to calmer waters, but Neverland was well behind her now. Did she dare sail on? She studied the map. If she were where she thought she was, Shadow Island should be close. So Tink looked in every direction, but all she could see was water and sky. As Tink scanned the horizon, she noticed a single dark cloud ahead. It looked out of place in the bright blue sky. Strange, I didn't notice it before, Tink thought, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. Suddenly, a wave caught the boat and nearly turned it over. By the time she righted it, Tink knew she couldn't risk sailing on any further. She needed to head back to Neverland before it was too late. She turned the treasure around, but she was fighting against the wind now. She crossed wave after wave, but land didn't seem to be getting any closer. Her only choice was to get off the water and try to fly the boat back through the air. Tink had just started to tack, angling the sail, when she noticed the cloud right above her. Was it her imagination, or was the cloud following her? "That's silly," Tink said out loud. The cloud would go where the wind went, of course, and the wind was against her. At any rate, she didn't have to worry about a storm. There was only the one small cloud, and all around it, the sky was blue. No sooner did she have that thought than she felt the air turn cold. A raindrop splashed down on the Treasure's deck, and another followed. For a fairy, a rainstorm is no small thing. Each drop is enough to soak her. What to a human would be a light sprinkle felt to Tink like standing under a waterfall. Tink dodged raindrops as they spattered down. She ran for the cabin, but slipped on the wet deck, and one of her pom-pom slippers fell off. She tried to grab it, but the boat pitched it and rolled it away. She gave up chasing after it and ran for cover. Inside the cabin, Tink peered out at the rain. Great drops battered the deck, but strangely, she could see that just beyond the curtain of rain, the ocean was calm. Sunlight sparkled on its surface. The Treasure seemed to be caught in a miniature storm. If she could just sail through it, she'd be safe. Just then, a huge blast of wind hit the boat so hard the sail broke loose. The sheet flapped uncontrollably, like a hand waving for help. Tink ran to catch it, but was too late. With a shuddering jerk, the boat rose into the air. She heard a howl of gale. That means a ton of wind. The wind seemed alive, like a creature that had caught the boat and was tossing it around like a plaything. The ship's bell clanged wildly as the boat began to spin faster and faster. Tink grabbed the railing and held on tight. Light flashed around her as she was pulled up, 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 into the dark cloud. Uh-oh. And now we're on chapter 7. This begins on page 71. Gabby stood on the beach near Pixie Hollow, looking out to sea. The glare on the water hurt her eyes, but she couldn't stop staring. She pointed to something out on the waves. "There! See that? Is that Tink?" Mia, Lainey, and Kate squinted at the far-off dot. "I think it's just a pelican," Kate said. Gabby's shoulders slumped. They'd been waiting for ages on the beach, but there was still no sign of Tink or Tino's Treasure. Mia gave her shoulder a squeeze. "Don't worry. I'm sure Tink won't let anything happen to the boat." "But when will she be back?" Gabby cried. "We've been waiting all day." "Let's check with Fawn," Lainey said. "Maybe one of the seagulls spotted her." When Gabby had explained to Fawn that Tink had taken her boat and she needed it back, Fawn had gone to the shorebirds. She asked them to keep an eye out for a fairy in a boat. With luck, they could get a message to Tink to sail back as soon as possible. The girls found Fawn further down the beach, talking to a big gray seagull. The 4 friends knelt beside her. "Any news?" Kate asked. Fawn shook her head. "He just came back from Skull Rock, but he didn't see any sign of Tink or the boat. Don't worry," she added when she saw Gabby's face. "Tink can take care of herself." Back in the days when she'd go off with Peter Pan, she'd sometimes disappear for a dozen full moons, but she always came back. A dozen full moons? Gabby couldn't wait that long. "But I need the boat back now," she insisted. "Maybe we should go home for a little while," Lainey suggested. "The next time we come to Pixie Hollow, Tink will be back. Anyway, I have to get home to help with dinner. My mom asked me to shell the peas." Peas, Gabby thought. Who cares about peas? Tink had taken her great-grandfather's one-of-a-kind boat and sailed off to who knows where, and all Lainey could talk about was peas. Gabby folded her arms around her chest. "I promised Poppy I wouldn't come back without Grandpa's boat," she told them. "I'm not going home until I have it." The three older girls stared at her. Gabby narrowed her eyes and glared back until Lainey held up her hands in surrender. "All right, Gabby," she said. "Have it your way. We'll wait." "There's no use just sitting around on the beach," Kate stood and brushed the sand off her pants. "Why don't we find something else to do? When Tink gets back, I'm sure we'll hear about it." There she is with her arms crossed. Gabby is pretty set on finding that boat. Gabby wouldn't have minded waiting on the beach, but she followed the other girls back up the trail to Pixie Hollow. As they passed the home tree, Gabby noticed Tink's tea kettle workshop. Maybe it was just the way the sunlight came slanting through the tree branches, but for a second, Gabby thought she saw a wisp of smoke rise from the chimney spout. A sudden hope took over her. Maybe Tink wasn't really out at sea. She imagined Tink inside her tea kettle, waiting for someone to find her so they could laugh about her trick together. As the other girls walked ahead, Gabby stopped. She knelt down and tapped on the door with her finger. When there was no answer, she gave it a little push, and the door opened easily. The doorway was so small, Gabby had to lie flat on the ground to see inside. It was a bit like looking into a sugar egg, the kind where you peep through a hole into a miniature scene. The tea kettle's rounded walls were lined with shelves that held Tink's tools. Tiny pliers, bitty pots of paint and glue, and scraps of steel wool no bigger than Gabby's pinky fingernail. A rocking chair made from a human-sized spoon sat in one corner, next to a lamp with a tea strainer shade, and a pot holder rug covered the floor. There she is peering into Tink's tea kettle. The fire poker was made from an old silver toothpick. The fire was cold, and Tink wasn't there. The lump returned to Gabby's throat. Where had Tink gone? And what was Gabby going to tell her dad? She was about to get up when she spied something on Tink's work table that looked like a note. Gabby's hand was too big to fit through the doorway, so she used a twig to get it out. It wasn't a note. It was a map. Right away, Gabby knew it was important. The map fit into the palm of her hand. She could see writing, but it was too small for her to read. But she knew who could. So she folded the map gently into her fist, and Gabby raced after her sister and their friends. Look what I found," she said. The other girls turned, and Gabby held up the map. Kate took it from her. "What's this?" "A clue," Gabby said. "I found it in Tink's workshop. It's a mop." Mia gave her a disapproving look. Tink wouldn't like it if she knew you were snooping in her workshop. Gabby ignored her. "Do you still have Great-Grandpa's magnifying glass?" she asked. Mia took the magnifying glass from her pocket and peered at the map. "What's Shadow Island?" she asked. "I've never heard of it," said Lainey. "Let me see." She took the magnifying glass and studied the map. "It's weird. It says Shadow Island right here, but I see Neverland on the map." "I bet that's where Tink went," Gabby exclaimed. "I don't know, Gabby," Mia said. "It's just a drawing. It might not mean anything." A bird screamed above them. Gabby looked up. The seagull was flying toward them, carrying Fawn on its back. The water talent fairy Silver Mist was with her. The seagull descended and landed at the girls' feet. Fawn fluttered off. "What happened? Did you find Tink?" Gabby asked. "Not exactly." Fawn had a strange look on her face. She glanced at Silver Mist. "A plover found this tangled in some seaweed." Fawn held out her hand, and she was holding Tink's pom-pom slipper. There she is riding on the back of the seagull. Okay, here we are with chapter 8. We only have 2 more chapters to go. Chapter 8. The girls stared at the tiny green shoe. The little ball of fluff was wet and bedraggled. It barely looked like a shoe at all, but Gabby knew it was Tink's slipper. She had never seen her without them. "So what? It's just your shoe," Kate said. "Maybe it fell off." "Maybe she got tired of wearing shoes and kicked them overboard," Mia added. "Sure," said Silver Mist. Gabby was only half listening. "I was the one who brought the boat to Pixie Hollow," she thought. "Tink's in trouble because of me." The lump in her throat was back. It felt as big as a hard-boiled egg. "Fawn sent more seagulls to look for her," Silver Mist said. "Fawn and I will go too." "Tink's probably fine," Fawn added, "but we want to be sure." Gabby swallowed hard around the lump. "I'm coming with you," she said. The fairies looked at each other. Gabby could tell they didn't like the idea. "It's cold out at sea," Fawn replied. "We may have to fly far, and there won't be anywhere to rest. Maybe it's better if you stay here." Gabby folded her arms across her chest again. This time, she wasn't going to let anybody tell her what to do. "It's my boat. Well, I'm the one who lost it anyway. Besides, I'm the one who found the clue." "What clue?" asked Fawn. Lainey held out the map. "Gabby found this in Tink's workshop." "What is Shadow Island?" "Never heard of it," said Fawn. "I have." Silver Mist looked over Fawn's shoulder. "It's a mysterious island where nothing is as it should be. But it's just a story. It's not a real place." "See, I told you, Gabby," Mia said. "We didn't know Neverland was real either until we found it," Gabby replied. There they all are talking. Kate raised her eyebrows. "She has a point." Mia sighed. "Well, if Gabby's going with you, then we all are." Fawn nodded. "All right, it'll be a search party. Go to the mill and ask the dust keepers for extra fairy dust, and something to carry it in. You'll need a lot. We don't know how far we have to fly." "We'll round up other fairies and meet back here," Silver Mist said. As the other girls set off for the mill, where the fairy dust was stored, Gabby studied the map. Shadow Island didn't look like an island at all, only a vague smudge out in the sea. It was hard to tell anything about it, even exactly where it was. Then Gabby had a brainstorm so good that she stood right up. She could ask Spinner. Spinner was a story talent sparrow man who traveled far and wide, searching for stories that he spun into magical tales. Once he'd even traveled home with Gabby, hiding in her backpack so he could learn more stories at her school. If anyone could tell her about Shadow Island, it was him. Finding Spinner was the problem. He came and went from Pixie Hollow, and no one ever seemed to know where he was or how long he'd be gone. When he was home, he liked to relax in the oddest places. He once told Gabby that he found it impossible to sleep indoors, since he'd spent so much time under the stars. My fingers aren't working. There we go. Gabby looked all over Pixie Hollow. She had almost given up when she found him, dozing inside a water lily in the watering hole where the cart mice drank. When Gabby woke him, Spinner sat up and yawned. His patched cap sat crookedly on his head, and the toes sticking out of his shoes looked cold. But he grinned when he saw her. "Well, if it isn't my favorite honorary fairy. Fly with you, Gabby." "Hi, Spinner," Gabby said. "I've been looking all over for you. I was afraid you were gone." "I just got back from Thorpe Mountain last night," Spinner said. "Long journey. Wore me out. Luckily, I found this nice waterbed." He patted the lily. "It's pretty," Gabby said. "And very comfortable," Spinner added. "I was having the most marvelous dream about a pink flying tiger. Would you like to hear it?" "Not now," Gabby said quickly. Spinner's stories were extraordinary. They transported the listener and made you feel as if you were there. There he is in his little lily pad. But Gabby didn't have time to listen to his story. I have a question." When she showed him the map, he nodded. "Oh, Shadow Island. Now there's a strange place." "So it's real," Gabby said. "I didn't say that," Spinner replied. "Never been there myself, but I've heard stories about it." "What kind of stories?" Gabby asked. "Spooky tales. Stories about creatures who live their whole lives in darkness, giants who touch the sky, talking deserts, that sort of thing." Gabby shivered. Shadow Island didn't sound like a place she wanted to go. "Do you know how to get there?" she asked. Spinner shook his head. "No one does. I've been looking for it my entire life, but I've never found it. They say you can only reach the island if it wants to be found." "Like Neverland," Gabby said. "Aye." Spinner took a bit of straw from his cap and chewed the end. "Can I ask why you're so interested?" "Tink's gone, and she took my boat," Gabby told him. "I need it back. I think she was going to Shadow Island." "Oh," Spinner frowned. "What?" asked Gabby. "Well, there's one thing I do know. Anyone who has ever reached Shadow Island has never made it home to tell about it." "Never?" repeated Gabby. Spinner shook his head. Now Gabby was no longer just worried about her boat. She was worried about her friend. All right, here we are on Chapter 9, beginning on page 93. Weak sunlight shone through the windows of the treasure and made yellow patches on the walls and floors. Inside the cabin, Tinker Bell slowly got to her feet. The boat had finally stopped spinning and tossing. She could still hear the ocean outside, but now the waves made a quiet shoosh noise. Cautiously, Tink opened the cabin door and peeked out. The wind had died down. Here she is peeking out. The storm was over, and there was no sign of the cloud that had carried her off. She stepped all the way out and saw that the treasure had run aground on a beach. The tide had gone out. The boat was stuck in the wet sand. Tink's foot felt cold. She looked down and remembered she lost a shoe. She searched the entire boat, but she couldn't find it. "It must have blown away in the storm," Tink said. "It was her favorite shoe, too, her pom-pom slipper." Tink kicked off her other shoe. There was no point in just wearing one, and turned her attention to the boat. The paint was worn away where the wind and rain had battered it. The sail was ripped, but that didn't worry her. She would enjoy patching it. When Tink turned to the mast, she stared. A crack ran right across it. Unless it was fixed, she wouldn't be able to fly the boat, much less sail it home. A smile spread slowly across Tink's face. She loved to fix things, and this was a problem worthy of her skills. Tink's stomach rumbled. She realized she hadn't eaten since she left Pixie Hollow earlier that day. Or had it been the day before? The sun was low on the horizon, but Tink couldn't say for sure whether it was morning or evening. She decided she'd have a good meal, then get started on fixing. Not knowing how long she'd been gone, Tink had bought plenty of food. Fresh bread, wheels of cheese, thimble buckets of honey, and dried cherries. She took a cherry and ate on the deck while she thought about what to do. She figured the storm had blown her back to Neverland, but though she'd been to every corner of the island, the beach here didn't look familiar. She didn't know which way Pixie Hollow was or how far. By the time she finished breakfast, the sun was no higher in the sky. In fact, it seemed to not have moved at all. Tink looked again. No, it had moved, but not in the expected way. It seemed to have shifted to the right. Tink had the strange impression that rather than climbing to its zenith, the highest point, the sun was slowly moving around the island, like a wolf circling at a distance. She felt as if she was being watched. I think Karen likes this story. You can see her right there. Tink stood and took a deep breath. Yes, adventure was in the air. She decided the mast could wait. First, she would go exploring. After all, hadn't the whole point of this journey been to discover something new? She refreshed her fairy dust from a barrel below decks. 1 cupful was all a fairy needed for a day of flying. But Tink took a second cupful, put it in a pouch, and tied it to her belt just in case. She started out over the sand, flying toward the dense forest that grew just inland. She hadn't gotten far, though, when she again had the feeling that she was being watched. So Tink turned. Nothing there. Only her shadow, on the sand. Jumpy, aren't we? She said to herself, her voice sounding loud in the silence. She flew on and had almost reached the edge of the forest when she thought she saw something move out of the corner of her eye. Tink spun around, but it was only her shadow again. The low angle of the sun made it stretch long across the sand. She looked like a giant. Tink had never imagined herself as a giant before. She waved her arms and spun in the air. She fluttered her wings double time. The giant shadow Tink danced along with her. Tink twirled around again. She was still spinning when she saw another shadow fall next to her own. She turned to see who it belonged to. But nobody was there. When she turned to look back at the shadows, she saw that a third one came. Tink's heart leaped, then dropped. Suddenly, she understood why the sun looked so different and why the beach was so unfamiliar. She wasn't on Neverland. She wasn't any place she'd ever been before. And she wasn't alone. Okay, that leads us into chapter 4. It's getting good. It starts on page 102. When Gabby got back to the beach, Mia, Kate, and Lady were all waiting. Kate had a large sack of fairy dust and was doling out pinches to the other girls. Everybody go ahead and dust some fairy dust. Here you go, Gabby. Kate sprinkled fairy dust over her. Gabby felt a familiar tingle and her toes floated a little off the ground. Fawn was saddling 2 seagulls, while Silver Mist looked on. Gabby was surprised to see Iridessa and Rosetta there as well. We're joining the search party, Iridessa said. Tink's our friend, too. Don't call it a search party, Silver Mist said. It sounds so serious. But that's what we're doing, Iridessa said. We're searching for Tink. We're looking for Tink, Silver Mist corrected. Tink, our friend, who has just gone for a quick boat trip and will probably be back at any moment. After all, we don't know anything's wrong. Iridessa frowned and opened her mouth to reply, but Rosetta cut her off. Searching, looking, who cares? We just want to be sure she's okay. Right, said Fawn, cinching his saddle tighter. The seagull shifted and ruffled its wings. The gulls are ready. Silver Mist, you and I will ride Aurk. Aurk. That's a funny name. Everybody go ahead and say Aurk. Fawn squawked the name with a seagull accent. Rosetta, you and Iridessa can take car. It sounds just like a bird. Everybody say car. Rosetta eyed the large seagull. I'm not riding that bird. Why not? Asked Fawn. He smells like fish, Rosetta complained, and I don't like the way he's looking at me. Fawn rolled her eyes. Of course he smells like fish. He's a seagull. It's windy at sea, Ro. You won't make it far flying on your own. You'll get blown away like dandelion fluff. Rosetta put her hand on her hips. Then I'll ride with one of the girls. I'll carry you. I don't mind, Gabby volunteered. She loved holding fairies, but they rarely allowed it. There, see? Rosetta fluttered over and landed on Gabby's shoulder. It tickled, but in a nice way. She settled herself and took hold of Gabby's collar. All set. The slight weight of Rosetta on her shoulder made Gabby feel better. There she is with Rosetta. The talk with Spinner had left a twisty feeling in her stomach. She'd learned nothing about Shadow Island, nothing helpful anyway. But the other fairies didn't seem worried, and their mood rubbed off on Gabby. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe Shadow Island was just a made-up place after all. Gabby hoped so. What should I do with this, she asked, holding up the map. Hold on to it, I guess, Silver Mist told her. I don't know how much use it'll be. I still don't believe the island exists, she looked around. Everyone ready? Look, Mia said suddenly, pointing. A small dark cloud had appeared on the horizon. It was all by itself in a bright blue sky. It reminded Gabby of a little of a lost black sheep. It's only a cloud, Fawn said. Nothing to worry about. Fawn and Silver Mist climbed onto their seagull, and Iridessa got on hers. The gulls spread their wings and lifted off, and one by one the girls rose after them, Kate first, followed by Mia and Lainey. Gabby took a deep breath of the salty air and pushed off the ground. She didn't feel worried anymore. She was going to find Tink and the treasure and bring them home. She was sure of it. And she knew her friends would help her every step of the way. There they are, all flying. All right, and that is the end of our story. So this continues in Through the Dark Story. Wow, I can't talk today. Wow. Ooh. The story continues in the book Through the Dark Forest. It's the next Finding Tinkerbell story. So if you're interested in continuing this story, you can find the next book, Through the Dark Forest, and that again is by Kiki Thorpe and illustrated by Jana Christie. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I want you guys to answer a few questions for me. I want you guys to tell me who your favorite character is, okay? I want you guys to tell me if you had a ship. I want you to draw me a picture of what it would look like, and then I want you to tell me what you would name it. Maybe you could comment that down below, but if you don't want to comment, you could just tell your adult, okay? And I want you to tell me your favorite part of the story. I think my favorite part was learning all of the cool things inside Tink's tea kettle. Like, that's pretty awesome to have really creative ways to use, like, things that we find. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so you guys think on those questions. I hope you enjoyed this book, and we'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.